And I've heard this concept of releasing the code for various different things, right? And the idea really being behind it is, I believe like there's GitHub repositories where you can go and you can actually see how things are calculated in certain algorithms. And perhaps that would be helpful. Like I'm sure that code is proprietary and, most firms would not want to give it up, but, that might be a solution for if you make it public, if it's more open source, then, because Mozilla, like Firefox, sort of started out that way, right? It was open code. And it was developers around the world that helped build it up. So you could follow a similar concept, perhaps, with certain things that are for social good, that are going to impact an entire society, where you, or at least you release like certain parts of the code to help, first of all, have transparency, to garner trust from consumers. And also, there might be flaws there that someone can help you fix if they go in and they look at it.
I think open code is great, amazing. We should support as much open source code as possible. But also be mindful that we need open data as well, and transparency on what data is being collected, right? Because you may have a pretty, good code, but with the biased data, you still create these biased trained models. Right. So I think your point about open code is amazing. We should definitely push for it, but also transparency on data. I want to touch on something that Naimal also said about data and the potential for creep. So there's this this idea of anonymizing personally identifiable information. So you anonymize a data set and you say, we're going to give you a rate on your insurance, for instance, but we're not going to look at your race or your gender. We're going to take those attributes out of the decision-making process, and therefore we're going to make it fair. No difference between male or female, or no difference between your race, because the algorithm is not going to even see it. There's now a lot of documented studies that show even if you don't have the explicit PII information, the personally identifiable information, the AI is able to infer those attributes from other things. For instance, salary rates for similar positions, male versus female, the distribution is skewed in favor of male. Therefore, the algorithm can actually identify who's a male, who's not, based on other things. You're buying a house, you have postal code. Although I don't know what race you belong to, neighborhoods have race distributions. Therefore, the AI algorithm is able to predict or estimate what races you're likely to belong to and make decisions based on that. There was a recent study by a group of MIT students who showed even if you take out sexual orientation of people, you can very accurately, the application they developed was called Gaydar, that you can very accurately identify which sexual orientation you belong to, even if it's hidden. So you can look at people's data, take out sex, race, sexual orientation, all of that. AI can predict very, very accurately all of that. So even if you think about anonymizing data, taking out personally identified information, you're still not safe from the biases, right? So
it's interesting how AI seems to want to just categorize people.
because of the way we train it, right? Like learning from data. I think that basically that paradigm itself is a bit flawed. But again, since the accuracy is so high, who cares, right? That's the problem, right? Because if you're learning from historical data, this what Ibrahim was mentioning will always happen, right? Because historically, a certain race was disadvantaged financially, right, socioeconomically, right? Similar to if you think about sexual orientation, there's probably behavioral patterns, things that even like basically financial status, a lot of things, right? Like because a particular sexual orientation was probably discriminated against, so they probably had a worse financial and career trajectory. So that data is going to be picked up by the AI, and they will think, I'm just simplifying a little bit, that, oh, if someone went to this school, like not a good school in terms of grades, there's a chance that their sexual orientation is not one of the common ones, because it just correlates the data with the hidden variable, right? So even if we do not feed the data explicitly, because of how the society has been structured, because that we are learning from historical data, it's going to be automatically incorporated into the algorithm because we're just learning from past data. So to solve that, again, technically, we can say that there are things that you can try to do, like debias the data and stuff. But even that's not foolproof at all, right? So what we really have to do is just be aware that this may happen and take explicit measures that when this happens, we identify it and either solve it or don't use it.
Right. That's a really good point, where it all seems to come back to data. I feel like most things nowadays come back to data because everything's being digitized and technology is very data driven.